believe, is from Summerland.
Oh,
Oh, you know what? Here we go now. I had the wrong user selected. Okay, we should be live up on YouTube now. The world can continue on here. There we
Sandra
go.
says she can hear us.
Okay, so we are live on YouTube. Welcome to the first Friday webinar of the year, everyone. Thanks for your patience and letting me get these up and running again. And pretty busy here in the office as we work toward a few different things. And you can see I've got our publisher, Andrew Harbridge, with us here again. He's come back to say hi and give us a little update later on the process of what we're going through in terms of editing the Mosaics books. And so today we're going to talk about Mosaics 4, which is now available for sale at Debra Wanless Music website. That's what it looks like here. And I'm going to play through the first half of the repertoire for you today of what we call the Group 1 music, the Baroque and classical style pieces. By the time we get to grade 4, it's quite exciting. There's a bit more complexity to the music. I'm going to talk a lot about the structure today of the classical pieces, and I'll give you some pedagogical insights to the Baroque music. But there's 17 pieces to get through. I'd like to get through them in an hour. And I'll try not to rush, and I'll make little comments along the way as I have been doing. If you've missed any of the others in this series from the prep to grade 3 book, there are 7 webinars there, all on the YouTube channel. You can check out anytime. And in 2 weeks' time, on Friday, whatever, that must be the February 7th, I'll play through the group 2 music, the second half of this book for you. And then next week, we're going to continue our series with Dr. Erin Parks, who's been giving us webinars on teaching students that are either neurodivergent or students with exceptionalities. And she has 2 great webinars out already that we can watch. Our first one is probably our most watched webinar of all time, where she just talks about a general overview of working with neurodivergent students. And then back there in December, or it was late November, perhaps, she gave us a webinar on dealing with students with autism. And so the next one in the series is next Friday, January 31st. I know a lot of you have already registered for that. And that one deals with working with students with ADHD. She also has another webinar plan that we're going to run later in March, I believe. And it's dealing with students with exceptionalities and twice exceptional students. And so watch for that later on. And then another webinar we have coming up, we're going to have Dr. Elaine Keeler come on. I see Elaine's on the call today. Thanks for joining us today, Elaine. And we've decided that she wants to go through the classical period and how it relates to the books and the music that we've been releasing, probably up to grade 4. And we're going to do that one at the end of February, on February 28th. And the neat thing about that, those of you that may recall her webinar from a couple of years ago, or a couple of webinars, where she played from her forte piano that she has at home. And she's going to get some more updates done to that piano to tweak it a little bit, she promises. And so that'll be a really neat one to hear some of this music that I'm going to play today, but from her forte piano with her expert insight. And she knows a lot about Canadian music and a lot about historical performance practice. She's a retired professor emeritus from University of Carleton, and has all sorts of projects. I'm reading through some music that she's given me that are by Canadian composers from back in the 1800s that we're looking at considering for grades 7 and 8. And just a wealth of information. So I think we should look forward to that webinar as well. And we thank her for preparing that information for us and for being here today. She's also a CC teacher. And so without further ado, let's turn this over to Andrew for a second. Andrew, you can give us just an update on the publishing, and you want to talk about a special webinar that you and George are going to give, George Lidhurst from Time Warp Technologies, on the process behind the editing. What do you have envisioned for that?
Well, George, I called him the Sherlock Holmes of music the other day. If I get stumped searching for an original source or a very early copy, he is fantastic at tracking down these original scores. So it's quite a process. Sometimes the scores we have don't have complete information where they're from, and tracking them down can be tricky. And we scour the libraries of Europe and the United States and Canada to find these scores. The last one we found was in Belgium. And they're just not, you can't just see them on the website. Sometimes you have to ask them, will you send us a copy of this book? So it's very interesting and very rewarding when we find one of these original works. And then we're trying to be as true as we can to the original composer's intentions.
Right.
So you're getting lots of scholarship in this, and George and I will go into a lot more detail at this following webinar.
Yeah, we're hoping to have that sometime in April, perhaps, so the two of you come on and talk about that process. Has been very enlightening for me as well to work on this editing. And there, we're consulting those original scores. And as I'll show you today, there are a couple times where we override what's there. And I'll give you the license in a couple of instances you'll see on the scores where things don't quite make sense. We're following the original, but there's obviously been an error. And sometimes copyists go beyond that and override it. In some cases we have, in some cases we haven't. So there's all these neat decisions to be made. We'll talk about those as they come up. And ultimately, try not to worry too much about I think the message is try not to worry too much about those fine-grained details on exams. Examiners aren't looking in that much detail necessarily. It's important to work like this with our students to instill these attitudes of scholarship and being faithful to the score. But in terms of performance, we realize that people make decisions for different reasons, many different reasons. And so we're not there to assess that in the moment. We're here to understand if the student is, prepared their work and how musical they are being. Of course, those details add up to a nice performance or a suitable performance or a well-informed performance, but we don't quite get so caught up in those details.
Uh,
So go ahead.
often we aren't given any details on the composer's score.
Yeah.
It's just the notes. There may not be any dynamics or fingering written in. So we're going with our scholarship on that and what makes sense.
Yeah.
So that probably follows. Are you okay? Would an examiner be okay with changing a dynamic if they wrote it in the score?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll talk about that. I've been talking about that in some of the webinars and a lot of the pieces. It's that, it's quite nebulous, especially in the Baroque period, but also in the classical period, where you look at all the different editions and so-called sources that there are out there, and they all have different dynamics. And you'll hear me today demonstrating, and part of what I want to do is put the score up on the screen while I'm playing so you can see I'm not always following the dynamics we're publishing. A lot of the time, most of the time I am, but there are times where I just don't hear it or feel it that way. And that's perfectly fine.
And
Um,
that would be the same with ornaments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ornaments is a big thing. We're notating some ornaments, but the ornamentation, especially in the Baroque period, is going to be a lot up to the performer. And at this level, even grade 4, not so concerned about ornaments yet. And I'll talk about them in a few cases here that we have and how we're trying to get the message across to you as to what's acceptable. And then it's up to you to figure out with your students and their talent level, their skill level, what are they able to convey. So a lot of latitude there. Um, Anything else, Andrew, about the publishing side? I know everything can be ordered from which website now in terms of our book?
Debra Wanless, and we sent a massive order of stock to Long and McQuaid.
Right.
So I noticed that it's up for sale on their website,
Yeah.
and that they should have stock as soon as those boxes arrive.
Right. So again, everyone, just to recap, everything from our prep book, grade 1, 2, 3, and 4 is now available this week. We're working pretty hard on 5. We'll have that out to you probably in a couple of months or so. And then we move on to 6 from there. And then we're feeling really good about ourselves. But it's a lot of work. We're really happy to bring the music to you. Really happy to share grade 4 because, again, as we get into the higher levels here, the intermediate levels, I should say right now, the complexity gets a little more interesting. And we're really excited to bring you some of this music here. I realize my keyboard's upside down. I've got it highlighted there, and I've tried fixing that, and I just can't get it to work on the iPad. So we'll leave the keyboard like that for now. It's going to be quite small on your screens by the time I put the score up there. I'll have my video cam on the side. I put that there just in case someone's interested. I know a couple of you have asked in the past for that keyboard shot, and I'll see if I can get that fixed for next time as well. In the meantime, Sonia is also asking, and if anyone has any questions, throw them in the chat box, and I'll try and see them in between pieces and answer as we go. If we want to use different dynamics or ornaments, do you want that notated in submitted music for exams? Not necessarily. You can do that if you want. It's helpful, but especially today with, the majority of our exams being heard online, the examiner a lot of the times isn't even getting your score that you're using. If it's an in-person exam, that's fine. The students are still encouraged. Please bring the music for the examiner. But a lot of cases, examiner doesn't have the score available, or they're looking from a different one. That's okay. If you have something prepared differently, as long as it sounds stylistic, our examiners are trained to accept a very wide variety of performance practice detail.
Yeah, and the examiners, a lot of them will have it in super score.
Yeah.
And by the way, in your super score, you can change the dynamics. You can write on the screen what you want.
You can annotate and save it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And at some point too, well, when you and George come on, we'll talk about SuperScore and give everyone a refresher on what that means and how you can have these digital copies of these things on your iPad, which is really great. Okay, let's dive right into the music then, everyone. Andrew, I know you have to leave in a little while, so everyone, Andrew's going to be here for a little while. He's going to help me out, share the space. I appreciate him being here today, and then at some point he's just going to disappear, and that's fine. I'll be here with you for the duration.
And I'll try to watch the chat here.
That'd be great. Okay, so to get going, I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but first I have to make sure my audio is set up.
Yes. One of the things we did as well with all the pieces is put as much information as we can where you could find the original scores from. If you wanted to consult yourself, right. Consult the sources yourself.
Okay, so here's our table of contents here. Oh, hang on. I need to share that. Before. Okay, so here's our table of contents. You can follow along with me here as we go. You can see the 17 pieces I'm going to play in group 1. You can also take a look there at group 2 and what's coming up in a couple of weeks' time that I'll play through. A lot of interesting music, and again, we're trying to source music here that maybe a lot of it has not been published previously. Also featuring a few pieces in grade 4, music by women composers, historical figures that were forgotten or suppressed over time. And in group 2, you're going to see later on a lot of Canadian music by Canadian composers, which we're happy to feature most of them for the first time. So here's the first piece here, a baroque piece, Air in B flat major by Handel. And in this one, I'm just going to play through casually. I'm going to try not to do the repeats here today. I'll add some ornaments here and there. And what I wanted to think about or feature in this one is the importance of 3/8 time. And that is 1 per bar. If it goes too slow, it's going to start to feel like 3/4. So I'm going to be a little bit on the quicker side. But again, I'm trying to hold my tempos back. I tend to play a bit on the quick side. I'm going to try and hold my tempos back to more what's realistic for a grade 4 student in most cases. And I think with this one, you've got a really great idea of counterpoint, this imitative counterpoint between right hand and left hand. So I'm going to be working hard to bring out the left hand. A lot of times in this music, students don't realize or aren't coached in a way that allows them to realize that in a counterpoint like this, both hands can be more as equal. On the piano, we're always balancing and tempering, and every piano is a little bit different, but we can treat that left hand as an equal partner here to bring out that dialogue back and forth and to hear what often will be a continuo part in most of the Baroque music I'm playing today, which imitating a cello string player, balancing that off with a solo instrument and how they work together. So it's not always right hand heavy, let's say. We've got some dynamics marked on the score. I'm probably going to follow most of those, but not all. And so just to give you an idea of how this music sounds today, and then some ideas about performance practice and what's acceptable. So, again, you can follow along here. I'm just going to adjust a few things so you can see my webcam from a different angle. I'll be adjusting my audio off, and if there's any trouble, Andrew, just let me know.
Okay.
Audio quality, I'm constantly monitoring that and changing the volume depending if I'm talking or if I'm playing.
Maybe you want to play a chord or something. I'll tell you if it sounds underwater or not.
How's this here?
Excellent.
That sounding good? Okay, so let's go right into Air in B flat major. Everything sounding okay there then?
It sounds great.
Okay, super. So there you can hear I'm trying to that contact between the two hands and that dialogue we're trying to highlight here in a piece like this. Some nice dynamics. Towards the end of the second half, the music kind of gets a little bit more intense. There's a few more notes going on at once. And so I pull that out of the dynamic a little bit to try and give a sense of structure so that the listener knows that the end is coming. So that's our first piece. Again, we have lots of music to get through here, so I'll try not to talk too much. This is a really neat piece. I was excited that we were able to include this tambourin by Elisabetta de Gamberini, a baroque composer, Italian. It's got a really nice driving left hand, and it's kind of reminiscent of the musette in D major that we're all fond of. It reminds me of that a little bit. The left hand drives in 6/8, and so on beat 1, the finger 5 is controlling the pulse, and then on the second big pulse of most measures, the thumb is controlling. So this is a neat one here, I think, where we have to teach students how to balance to the thumb more and make sure that their thumb is an equal partner with finger 5. So they're not just thinking from the bottom up to 5, from 5 to 1, but also from finger 1 to finger 5. And so sometimes I'll get students to practice this with accenting the thumb a bit so they get used to actually relaxing the thumb and favoring that thumb as much as they do finger 5. Most of the articulation is detached. There aren't many slurs. And you'll probably notice me towards the end where there are these 3-note slurs over the bar line. I'm actually doing them a little differently. I'm quite fond of 2-note slurs with 1 note detached. I'm going to add that in there. That's perfectly allowable in this time period. It's hard to say whether Gamberini actually wrote in these slurs herself or not, and she was clearly composing for the harpsichord. This sounds fantastic on my digital harpsichord, but to the piano, we have to thin it out a lot because there's a lot of action. I am favoring the right hand a lot more and trying to hide that left hand a little bit because it's so repetitive. So here's the tambourin by Gamberini.
Yeah. I have a comment about the title.
Yeah.
That is the tambourine is a form of the word tambourine, and we think of the tambourine as that circle, the round instrument with the metal beads in it, or the metal things. But everything I've seen from the Baroque era, it's a drum without those metal things in them. And there are some authentic recordings out there where they have that drum sound going along with this one.
Right.
I really like the rhythm of these pieces.
Yeah. And so that drum we're going to hear in the left hand here being tapped on. Sounds really good with the repeats too. I mean, students could do the repeats on an exam if they want, even if they weren't going to do ornamentation. It's a short enough piece, we don't mind that. But you can hear there, I'm not totally following the slurs on the page, and that's okay. If you follow slurs on the page, that's perfectly fine too. I'm just giving you how I've learned to do with this. And so Anita's commenting here, scholarly practice suggests terrace dynamics, but some contemporary performances use crescendo and diminuendo. We do in fact accept both, and I know Scott McBride Smith, the American pedagogue, I've had conversations with him where he talks about this idea of terrace dynamics and how actually it may not be that way. I think it's a really good way to start, but from there the latest scholarship is starting to go in a different way where you could have crescendo. And if you listen to period instrument chamber groups that are using period instruments, they certainly do employ a lot of crescendo and diminuendo as well. So to me it's always a combination. That's a good point, Anita. Okay, Fantasia in E minor. This is one that Andrew edited here. Andrew, what did you edit this, or how did you edit this?
When we say edited, it's very little changes. Yeah. So it might just be the fingering and a couple slurs.
Yeah, okay,
that's it. So maybe I shouldn't have even put edited on there because that puts a few people off. But when we say edited, it is very, very little.
Yeah. It's you're the one that's made the markings on this and put this one together specifically.
Yes, and this was one we found in Teleman's handwriting.
Oh,
so you are getting exactly what he wrote.
Yeah.
So I noticed our competitor had a slightly different version and they changed the notes, but you are getting exactly what they wrote.
Très vite, very quick. 2/2 time. It's very easy to let this one settle into 4/4. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play it a bit on the quicker side, but not as quick as it could be. so that it feels like two beats in a bar. I think that's the important thing here. We've talked in some of the past webinars about how to articulate this music. The left hand mostly detached to leave room for the right hand to be heard on the keyboard, but also to emulate the string players and what they would have to do. So I won't go through that whole lecture again. But basically, in the right hand, the quicker notes are more legato, and the longer note values are more detached. And the further the notes are apart, the more they can be detached. That's just sort of a general outline of how that can work.
I think a lot of us think students don't like music like this, but
Yeah.
the students in my studio love this piece. I've taught it for years, and they're very attracted to the rhythm of it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I could see this piece being very popular too. Absolutely. It's nice to have it in our collection here. Okay, so the first of, or not the first of, we've done a few of these before in the Clementi, where the only pieces we've published from our previous series, the New Millennium series, in the new series are some of the Clementi Opus 36 sonatas, or sonatinas rather, simply because there is this version that George has uncovered along with the help of Dr. Arthur Uhl, and they did a presentation on this a couple of years ago in our webinars. You'll find those on the YouTube channel, where Clementi published this version of Opus 36 with considerable improvements. And these are improvements that Clementi believed in and that he added to his score. And they're along the lines of trying to expand the range of the playing, given that he had newer instruments at his disposal that he was selling. Because as we know, Clementi was a piano salesman or manufacturer, let's say. And so he wanted to celebrate the expanded range that sounded better on the new modern forte pianos he was creating around the turn of the 1800s there. And then also in some places you get little pedal points, little ornaments. He's rearranged a few things. So I'm finally getting used to this one because I've been playing it a lot over the last few months to get used to it and understand it. I'll play it through. I'll put the first page on the screen here so you can see, or actually there aren't a lot of changes on the first page. Maybe I'll highlight the second page. So when I get to the second page at measure 25, you can follow along, and of course there's a third page as well. I'll keep the second page up there. And you'll hear different things. If you're familiar with this movement, you'll hear little things that just sound a little bit different or out of place or different than we're used to hearing. But we enjoy those and we want to publish them and bring them out there so that we can see. We believe that this is a very legitimate version of these Clementi sonatinas, and we're hoping that our publication will help celebrate this.
Yep. Dr. Uhl, he performed this, so it will come out on the streaming services, and it's his performance. And the one on Superscore, of course, is his performance. I
Oh,
love
there
that
it
one.
is. Yeah, just a few little twists and turns. It's kind of neat. Here's the last page and what it looks like. Just some places where the left hand's a bit higher than we're used to hearing. Some interesting little ornaments. Oh, sorry. There's our third page there. Okay, going on to the next one. Back to the Baroque period here again. All this music fits in what we call Group 1 from our syllabus. A gavotte in G major. This one to me is more of a true gavotte where we begin on the second half of the bar and the music pushes forward to beat 1. I think here what I'm trying to highlight is the idea of gesture in the right hand. I am hiding the left hand a little bit more. There are some difficult double thirds here in the left hand for students, I think. This is good time in this key of G minor to work on that with grade 4 students. Some difficult two-note slurs, lots of detail, and to me here it's really about the gesture. Can students create audible gesture without being too heavy on each beat? Save the highlight or save the accent for one per every for every 4-bar phrases roughly. So I'll give you my version of this and see what you think. So lots of articulation there. I'm not lifting quite as crisply for some reason. I don't know today. I feel a little bit more legato somehow. But the lifts are there. They're not quite as short as they could be. Some students may want a little bit more detail in this one.
I've never heard of a legato mood before.
Yeah, I know. I'm usually lifting more carefully, I feel. Minuet in D minor, I think that'll really suit this one. Nice simple tune, maybe a slightly on the easy side for grade 4, but we're happy to include it here. There's lots of range and different things. And again, really getting students to listen to that left hand as an equal partner here, I think will be really helpful in getting this to drive forward. Not many places where I would add ornamentation in this one, even if I was doing the repeats on exams, because it's shorter. Students could do the repeats. If they add an ornament somewhere, that's great. But it's certainly fine to go straight through as well. So quite short and sweet, really. And again, if students wanted to lengthen that out, they certainly could on an exam. Okay, now, the first of our really nice sonatinas here that we're highlighting in grade 4. And what I like about these ones coming up here is the sense of structure is a little more enhanced. In grade 4, the music's a little bit longer. And so you can get almost a true exposition development recapitulation. And I think this one's a little bit different though now that I look at, sorry, this one's not quite, I like the structure of this, but it's not quite exposition development recap. I sort of think of this one just as a simple rondo, where you've got a really short B section at the end, at the bottom of the first page, you see a little double bar line there, and that highlights a little 8-bar segment there, which I sort of call section B, and then at the top of page 2 we return to section A. So think of this one as an ABA, but with the A a little more enhanced, has a little bit more length in it than we might otherwise hear. Very tuneful, lots of articulation, lots of fun with this one. And sort of, it's just the one with the death-defying Alberti bass on the second page. A lot of students will, challenge themselves here, and I'll probably challenge myself and get a little bit in over my head too. We'll see if I can keep up with my left hand when I get there, depending on the tempo I choose at the start. That's the real challenge with this one, I feel.
This score is the truest you'll find in print. We did a lot of back and forth with this one, and the only difference in this one and Schmidt's original was we moved one section an octave higher for the sake of variety, bar 17, 18, 19, 20, starting at bar 21. That's the only change from the original.
Right. And partly we did that because that's the way it is printed in some other versions. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. I
Yeah.
just thought that was a great improvement.
Yeah, yeah.
But some of the modern ones out there, they've changed a lot.
And so if you've heard that, many of you will hear this, you've heard this piece before, you've probably heard it cataloged in a different opus number as well. Where did you find this source again? It was at a university in the States?
Um, I can't remember which university it was,
I
but
think it was
I
in
think
Michigan.
there were. Oh, that's right, it is.
Yeah,
And we had two scores done by the composer. There was an earlier one and a later one,
right.
and I think we decided with the earlier one,
Yeah,
with that one change with the octave.
yeah.
But
So,
I noticed our competitor took a lot of liberties with inventing new stuff in this one.
yeah.
If you check back,
So many of you, the bottom line is many of you are going to recognize this from other conservatory books. It's going to have a different opus number on it. This is the opus number we found attached to the original that we used from that Michigan university then. And so that might create a little bit of confusion, but
yeah.
if it's in our
And
book, you're welcome to use it on an exam.
measure 10, for instance, is what the composer wrote.
Right.
But you will have heard it differently elsewhere.
Yeah.
Such a great piece.
Yeah. And if I think I remember, it's that whole ending, that whole last 8 bars we hadn't heard before.
Yeah, it was cut off.
Yeah. So
My
that's nice to
student,
have that.
I gave or sold my first copy to my student David, and I said, "You are the first in Canada to try this," and that was the piece he picked out of all the others.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he just gobbled it up. He had it learned in 1 week.
That's good to hear. Okay, Allegro in G major, CPE Bach, little pre-classic piece, more in Baroque style than anything. And this one's a bit tricky for those 16th notes. Again, there's places where the left hand has to interject and provide a little bit of excitement here. Some terrace dynamics I'll try to employ here too. We just hope you enjoy this one. Lots of character and variety in this one. Again, short enough that if students want to play the repeats on an exam, they're certainly welcome to because of its length.
This was another one that was very hard to track down.
Yeah, eh?
We found it in an old con or old Western album,
Right.
and it's not very available anywhere except through a library.
Okay. And this is a really great companion piece to it. It's in the same key. This is more of a famous, originally transcribed for the Sonata for Flute and Figured Bass. We've often seen this before played on the piano transcribed, and so here we're happy to offer it again here. The long running eighth notes are kind of fun. It's a bourrée, so it's going to be a little bit on the faster side. I'm sort of thinking in 2 beats per bar here instead of 4, and I find students have a little bit of trouble probably with the running eights at times, the way they go, but the fingering is really important to use. And so I work a lot on getting them to play from the larger knuckles with their fingers, almost like a guitar technique, to get those to come out nice and strong in the right hand. I'm sure most of us have heard that one before. The left hand just kind of plucks along nice and easy there, but I try to draw students' attention to that left hand so that they can hear the interesting direction and twists and turns that that left hand takes as an equal partner. Okay, back to the sonatinas that I've been excited to share here. This one, an F major by Debra. Again, the structure is really amazing because we finally get a full exposition there, which is repeated. Of course, they don't repeat it on an exam. And then development, it's very obvious when the development ends and we get a satisfying conclusion as a recap. And so the formal divisions are really easy to see there. You get a full modulation to C major by the end of the exposition, which we would expect. Not quite a theme 1 bridge theme 2. Not quite that full yet, but still substantial enough that students can really understand that they're into the big time now. They're into the big music, and we get a full development, which is nice. Lots of development there with different sequences and themes, and a long-running improvisatory section with some fancy finger work. We'll see how my hands hold up here. I have to turn off the furnace to do these because the hum of the furnace gets into the mic too much and distorts the music. But now it's starting to cool off in here quite quickly.
It's hard not to make your head go along with that one. Terrific piece.
Here's a look at the second page here when we get to the improvisatory section at the end of the development there. In this one, I'm really aware of the left hand, how hard it is to balance and make it really quiet. It's something I've had to work at a lot in this piece because I don't play this texture all that often. And I found I have to be really light, take out the bones of my left hand a little bit, and really leverage my arm. If you look back at the recording, well, you probably can't see my left arm too well in the recording or on the overhead, but I'm working really hard with my arm there to balance and sort of carry the weight of things and lead the direction so my fingers aren't doing as much work, and all that translates into a little more controlled background sound there to support the right hand. Okay, a rustic dance, James Hook. Hook was famous for his classical compositions. This one's just a really fun 6/8. We tend to favor a lot of 6/8 pieces in the Mosaics collection, I find. More like a fanfare in a way here. Here's a look at the second page, which has a nice sort of repose there. Maybe what I'll do is I'll leave the second page up. I'll play the first page into the second page, and you can see what the Meno Mosso looks like on the score when I get there.
This was misattributed to Haydn, but it is in fact a Hook piece.
Right. Yeah, it was nice you could uncover that in the research.
I just found it by accident.
Yeah.
Almost sounds like a hunting song.
Yeah, very much so. Hunting horns. And so the meno mosso in the middle, I'm trying to hold back that tempo a little bit, make it feel and sound a bit more legato and really accent those crescendos in there or bring out the crescendos and the lyricism so that you've got a really distinct ABA format there or structure. That's what we would be listening for in that one, or I think is most important. Okay, another big sonatina, this one by Haslinger. This one I'm sure has been published before in some of the conservatory albums over the years. Here I like though because again the structure is just a little bit more lengthy. There's a little bit more to grip on there. The really long exposition that goes into the second page there. A really interesting development, even though it's the same sequence several times. That's really what a development is all about. It's let's have a quick modulation and take the same little fragment and sequence it through different keys is typically what they would do. And then towards the end of the development, you get some kind of improvisatory thing that brings you back, or a dominant pedal section, which would highlight the dominant of the home key that you're going back to. This one kind of does both, but it has some kind of interesting Neapolitan chord there in bar 33 that drives us back into the 5 of 5 that brings us back to the C major at the bottom of the page where the recap begins. So it's kind of a neat thing. It's got a few elements there that tie it all together. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just keep up the first page for now. And I'll show you that you've seen the second and third pages there. And of course, if any of you are watching on replay, feel free to pull out your books and follow along. Anyway, lots of fun in this one.
Yep. That's a terrific one too.
It's really great.
If I can toot our own horns here, I think we've put together a terrific collection of appealing pieces.
Yeah, I think so.
I call them some of the ones I don't like. I call them dogs. I don't think there's any of those in this collection. I could see students liking every single piece in
Yeah,
these. So
yeah. And I've been thinking about that too, and I really feel the same. I mean, it was hard to look at the old grade 4 book from the New Millennium series where we had 5 great sonatinas there that have stood the test of time and, we'll still be pulling those out for students. But it's going to be even better, I think, with this series here. And part of it's because it's new, and I think part of it, you may be listening in the audience or watching on the replay and thinking, what are these guys talking about? Well, we've had a few more months to live with this music, and it's really settling in. And so, if you don't feel it right away, please give it time. And then, of course, your feedback. Tell us what you think. Do you really find
yeah.
these quite tuneful? Are you able to sell these with your students? But know that if you're not feeling the same excitement we are, it just may be that it takes time to settle in. I know for myself, it takes me time before my ear will accept something that's familiar before I'll
And
really.
I'm very curious how teachers are finding the stave size, the font.
Right.
We've worked very hard to make it as clean and clear as possible. So
And so the PDF version I'm showing on the score isn't quite really what you're going to see, and I don't know that you can see here either. But the font is much larger. I mean, this is just a, can't even begin to say what the improvement is like from our old grade 4 book, given that the last 10 years we've had to publish it from a scan. Some of you know the story behind that. I won't get into it, but the font size is much larger here than most grade 4 books, I would say. Grade 5, we're going to start to go a little bit smaller again from there, but yeah, much clearer and should be easier to read for everybody.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Corrine. I have to go. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Andrew. Great you could join us here today. Always a pleasure to have you here. Have a great day and weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll continue on here. So Sonatina in G major. This one comes from one of the old Western books that we had published many years ago, 3 decades ago or so, and we pulled it out. It's by James Hook. Really quite popular. Not published all that often, but we think you'll like this one. Just looking to see, does the Mosaics replace the previous books? Absolutely, it does replace them. But the old books are going out of print. Some of them are already out of print. You'll still find some stock in the Long McQuaid system over the next year or even 2 maybe in some of the cases. But those of you that still have those old books and like to use them as supplementary, reading in addition to this. You can still use the old music on exams for indefinitely. So you can use music from either of the series. Of course, after 25 years of the old series, we were definitely ready to move on and give you some new choices, and that's what we're excited about. So you can use from either, but we hope you'll like the new ones. And again, the old ones are just going to get harder to find in the retail chain as we go here. So 3 pages for this one. I'm going to play it from a different score just simply because I won't have to turn pages. But again, a nice long exposition development recap for students to chew on here and get excited about. I'll leave you up there with the page 1. So again, very tuneful, lots of action there, lots of fun sonatina-like things going on in this one. And a great exposition development with a full recap there. Okay, then we go back here. We're going to pick up another gavotte. It's not clear to me exactly what this has in common with a gavotte. It doesn't start on the last half of the bar. I'm not sure if the title got misplaced here or what happened. Really well edited by Sandra Mogensen, who's done a lot of work on unearthing music for women or by women composers. And this comes from Elizabeth Turner's 6 Lessons for the Harpsichord. It's a baroque piece. Really interesting. We're really happy to be able to include this in the collection here. again, because of its length, students could do the repeats on the exam. The examiners would probably appreciate the extra time to write and make their assessment if it's only one page for grade 4. Same with this one, the Duchess of Devonshire's reel. We featured this before when we did a quick overview, I believe. Ignatius Sancho was an African-American who emigrated to the UK, to England, in fact, I believe. And we've got a great webinar that George Lythurst has done a couple of years ago on the YouTube channel. You should check out to learn more, because we're featuring a lot of music by Ignatius Sancho in the series. And this one's just a really fun little reel. Lots of Baroque dances. Difficult timing-wise, because students get tangled into these 16ths and 8ths, and then all of a sudden they're expected to stop on quarter notes. I've had a couple students play this already, and that's definitely a challenge for them to really be honest with their counting, in fact. Let's see, do we have another question here? Oh yeah, Wendy's asking here too, in addition to Mosaics replacing the previous books, is there a new syllabus released to include these pieces? Not really, no. We're not changing anything in the syllabus, other than you will notice by the fall, all of these pieces from the Mosaics collection will in fact be in the syllabus. A lot of them already are, some of them are not, and so we're going to be adding the extra ones in over the summer so that you'll see them there. But the syllabus itself doesn't change. As long as it's in the book, you don't need approval to use it on an exam. Is there an apostrophe missing in Devonshire's? That I'm not sure. We'll have to look that up. I would think not, just simply because we've gone through a lot of editing on these. So my feeling is that there wouldn't be if it isn't there. It's a good question. Students should add their own dynamics there. I didn't have too much to say. If I was doing the repeats, it would be a little more obvious what to do, I think. But lots of articulation, lots of lifts are important. This one, though, may be a more accessible piece for grade 4 than some of the others in some ways from the list A, or sorry, from the group 1 Baroque pieces. We're also really happy to put this minuet in. A little bit tricky. Elisabeth Jacques de la Guerre, a French composer for harpsichord from the Baroque period. And this one is quite heavily ornamented in the source. And so we worked with Cécile de Rosier, one of our examiners, who's a harpsichord player, who gave us some really great advice on, if we were going to do this for piano, we would probably need to edit with fewer ornaments. So there are far fewer ornaments here that we've listed to consider for students. They don't need to play them all, but they should play some of them. But just know that this is far fewer ornaments than is in the original, which would sound better on harpsichord. And I think the key to this one is probably taking a much slower tempo than we might be tempted to. So I'm going to slow it right down, more legato approach, to give time for these ornaments and the minuet dance steps to take hold. So a nice slower piece there for Baroque. Really quite charming. I think students will like this one as a nice contrast to some of the quicker ones. And then here we have another sonatina movement by Diabelli. Of course, at grades 4 and 5, we lean on Diabelli an awful lot, if not grade 6 as well, to give us the really fun tunes that students love to play from the classical period. And Diabelli, here he is into his hand crossing mode, where he's crossing back and forth. I find this quite death-defying. And so I'm going to try and make an attempt to hold back the tempo probably from where this could go. This could go quite quick and be very effective if a student was well rehearsed, let's say. So again, that one takes a little while to sink into the hands, not quite into my hands yet, but happy to play it for you to give you an idea of how it's going to go. And then our final piece, this is a great way to conclude, a piece called The Arrival, which comes from a collection of new cotillons, I think we say it, or cotillons, I'm not sure, by Francis Johnson. I'm not sure exactly on the year of the piece, but I've seen the whole collection. It's a neat collection of little scenes and things that come from different aspects of life, I believe. No, I know I shouldn't say where. I'll have to do some more research on that. But it's neat because it's got a large A-B format to it with this nice middle section there that goes from C major to C minor, very descriptive, back to C major at the beginning with a long recap. This one, a few problems with the score. You'll see some issues down below that we've notated, just so you know. There were some issues in the original where there was an F sharp and an F natural close to each other, creating a cross relation. And so we're recommending that we play those as F sharps toward the finish. And then I know I keep noting this thing in bar 9, just after that repeat dot, where the left hand doesn't quite match exactly how it's done later in the piece. And so I'm in fact changing the left hand at bar 9 from to, which will match what happens later on at bar 10, 11, 12, 13. We've printed it the way the original has been printed, but if students want to change that second beat in bar 9, they're certainly welcome to do so. We won't mind in the slice, and that's how I'm going to play it today. I'm not going to quite play it as is on the score, because to me it's more of an obvious error in the copy that we had. So that one can get a little bit rambunctious. I didn't hold back too much in that one. It doesn't have to go that fast, certainly, but it certainly does help too. You can see those left-hand octaves in the third line. Students don't have to play those at this level. They can just play the bottom one if they want, if their hands aren't big enough, or they do want to play it faster and it's hard to get those octaves. That's certainly an option that they can do in performance, whether it's on an exam, festival, whatever they want. And then you can see this nice thing in the second half there where we go to C minor. I just chose to do the repeat because I'm in the habit of doing that, and it balances with 16 measures with the first section. I think it's sort of a wise decision that students could make on an exam. But above all, we want to capture that giocoso feeling that's indicated at the beginning, the humorous element of it. There's a lot of exciting things, and I notice now when I'm playing these triplets in the right hand and they're tumbling down, I'm playing the first one louder to provide some kind of melody. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. You know, descending that chord, which provides a really nice focal point. I think that's a really wise thing to do with this particular piece. So that gets us through all of the repertoire here from group 1 in the series. I'm going to stop share here and come back to you. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions for me about the series, about this grade 4 book, about some of the suggestions I've made? You know, feel free to challenge. I think the overriding comment or message I want to get across is that it doesn't have to be one way. It doesn't have to be necessarily the way it is on the score. It's hard for us, and you know, when we do the work, and we'll get George and Andrew to come and present on it so we can see in better detail. It's hard to find a definitive source, and when you do find a definitive source, sometimes you see obvious errors. A composer may have their chicken scratch of how they did something. They hand it to a copyist. The copyist copies it out. A couple of things maybe get changed. That goes to the first publisher. The publisher publishes it a certain way. It gets published in different ways in different countries 300 years ago. And then we're looking back, and we really don't even know if we're looking at an original or not. A lot of work has to be done before there's consensus around that. And so dynamics are in different places, articulation markings are in different places. Nothing is standardized until we get to, let's say, Beethoven and Chopin, Schubert, these composers in the early part of the 1800s. Then you'll see when we get to group two, we're trying to hold ourselves more to what's on the page, and you don't see all that variety that was coming about in the late 1700s as people were just getting used to the idea of articulating things a certain way and being able to notate it. So that's some of the reasoning behind we're giving you that license, and you should take that license with your students to do certain things in ways that they may like. And you hear that I'm doing that in these short performances I'm giving. I don't know the music all that well, but I'm just trying to go with my instincts and what's allowable in performance practice, and give you an idea above all else just how this music goes and get you excited about it. And I hope you agree, because it's probably going to be with us a long time, this collection. It's a lot of work to redo what we did 25 years ago. We're happy to do it now, and we think we've got something here that can last at least 10 years. So, not seeing any questions. Thanks for those of you who are joining me live here, for helping me share the space. It's great to see so many of you here, and we hope you can come back next Friday. 2 Fridays from now, I'll go through the second part of this book. In the meantime, feel free to order it if you're curious. You can go to debrawanlessmusic.com, where they've got nice ordering there and good shipping value. I think they eat some of the shipping costs due to the rising shipping costs. You can also order from Long McQuaid if you have a Long McQuaid store or an independent retailer near you that you like to use and they don't stock the books yet. Direct them to Debra Wanless Music. They can reach out to Carissa Harbridge, Andrew's daughter, and she'll set them up with an account, and very simple to order within Canada. Probably a little more easy than we were dealing with in the past. So thanks everyone. Thanks for your positive feedback and your positive comments. Nice to see so many familiar faces. Happy New Year to everybody. And we've got some good momentum on the webinars, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Friday as well. And thanks to everyone for watching on replay too, those of you that have joined us here after the fact. Okay, take care everybody. Bye for now.